Hello, book lovers, and welcome to another episode of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. My name is Joe Moldover, and I am so happy to be here with you again. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome author Stephen McCauley. Stephen is the author of 7 novels, including The Object of My Affection, and most recently, My Ex-Life. 3 of his books have been made into feature films, and several were national bestsellers. He currently serves as co-director of creative writing at Brandeis. Stephen is joining us to talk about his favorite independent bookstore, Porter Square Books, located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Stephen, we're so happy to have you here with us today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Also with us is Lila Meglio from Porter Square Books. Welcome, Lila.
Hi, thank you.
And we're happy to have you. Lila, I have been to Porter Square Books many, many times, but for our viewers across the country who may not be familiar, we want them to get to know your bookstore a little bit better. So I am just going to start off with a couple of questions for you. And the first is, Porter Square Books is located in Somerville, Massachusetts. And for people who are not local, tell us a little bit about where you are and about the community that you serve.
Yeah, sure. So we are sort of right on the border between Somerville and Cambridge, Massachusetts. I think technically our address is in Cambridge, but I'm always really happy to claim that we're in Somerville because Somerville is my hometown. So it feels really special to be working at this store that, serves really my community. And yeah, so we have, Somerville and Cambridge are both, high density, close living, city life. It's a diverse area, really smart people who love books. We have a really engaged community who are, constantly coming in to have conversations about sort of things outside of the book world that they view us as a little bit of a third space and a place to sort of connect with each other. And we've got a cafe in the store that sort of makes for a great meeting space. So it really is very much a neighborhood bookstore is what we like to call ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's such a great atmosphere there. Tell us a little bit of the origin story. How did the shop get started and how long has it been around?
Yeah, so originally the store opened in 2004, and it was opened by 4 sort of alumni from another bookstore, from Concord Bookshop. And so that was the original iteration. And then in, I believe, 2014, it was bought by Dina and David Mardell. And they sort of were the second coming. And then the third sort of coming is that, and 2018, Dina and David sold half of the store's shares to a group of employees. So we are now an employee-owned bookstore, and we have 12 co-owners who make up the management group, and sort of all put in a lot of thought and input and our own sort of perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've always loved about the store, and I think that it does kind of give it this really unique character. I mean, tell us a little bit more about, for people who haven't had the pleasure of visiting the store, is there something sort of a unique fact or a unique feature or a particular quirk that you would want to tell us about Porter Square Books that people wouldn't know about if they hadn't been?
Well, I think that, again, our sort of trademark is really being very much by and for the community. So one thing that we do that I think is sort of a characteristic sort of spin is we have a series of events called Be the Change every month. And in that we sort of choose a topic that our community is talking about, and we find an author or a speaker who can come in and give a presentation on that topic. And then we donate 20% of store sales for 2 hours on that day to a related nonprofit. And sort of, we really take it very seriously, our sort of position in the community as, as a voice and a way to learn and educate yourself. And the Be the Change series is sort of just one facet of the ways that we do that.
That's amazing. Now is obviously a completely unique and very challenging time for independent bookstores everywhere. What can you tell us about how Porter Square Books is responding to the quarantine, to the COVID crisis, and how you're engaging with the community now?
Yeah, well, I mean, things change so quickly right now, and we've really been trying to adapt to the times. And so we've tried a lot of things. Some of them have stuck, some of them haven't. Being flexible is really key right now. But so some of the things that we're doing, we started really right as we had to close a quarantine newsletter called Shelf Stable. And for a while, when we really couldn't be in the store at all, we were putting that out every day. So we did that. We put it out every day for 60 days. And it was sort of a mix of staff picks. We had a little block that was a bookseller writing about a writing prompt or a form of inspiration, book reviews, all that sort of things. And everybody in the store contributed. So it was a little bit like getting to catch up with your booksellers from afar. Now we're doing that 3 times a week as we've gotten more busy. But some other stuff that we're doing, one of the things that we know that customers miss so much is the browsability. Sometimes exactly what book you want, but sometimes really like the joy is picking up a million books and going with something that you really had no idea existed before that. So we've come up with these book bundles where we choose the books for you. And you can give us sort of you can choose a mystery bundle, or a Josh chooses 3 paperbacks, which our bookseller Josh has a very particular taste that if you know our store, you know what you're in for. So that's our sort of way of doing something a little bit different. Another thing that we're doing that with is kids book bundles, so that you can get sort of just 3 or 4 books for a certain age range. And you can either buy that for yourself and your family and we'll come and bring it by to you, or you can choose to donate that, and we'll instead give it to a Cambridge or Somerville student who is getting free lunch. So really trying to do really different things. We just opened for curbside pickup. We're still figuring that out. So, it's been an interesting game. And what we've been really lucky for is just having such a great customer base and community who have been really supportive of us in all sort of stages of opening, have recognized that, we're figuring it out at the same time that everybody else is. So we're super grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, let me turn to you. So you selected Porter Square as your indie bookstore of choice. Can you tell us a little bit about what you love about this bookstore?
Well, I mean, to be completely honest, one of the main things that I love about it is that it's virtually across the street from where I live. And, that is just such an incredible asset. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about is some of the things that Lila has already talked about, really about the impact of this bookstore on the community. Because I've been living in Porter Square in Cambridge for a number of years, and I began hearing rumors that there was going to be an independent bookstore opening up in this shopping center virtually across the street, as I said. And at first I was kind of skeptical about this because it was a period when bookstores all over downtown Boston were closing, and even in Cambridge, which had always been a real haven, a mecca for book lovers and bookstore lovers, stores were closing. The numbers were diminishing. And in Somerville, Davis Square, where there were a lot of bookstores, those were all closing. And the other reason I was a little bit skeptical is because the shopping center has, is kind of has more of a commercial feel to it, a sort of a chain store kind of feel. There's a big Star Market there, and there was a Radio Shack when Radio Shack was a thing, and Dunkin' Donuts, of course. And it just didn't seem that it was going to fit into that. But it did open. I think it was 2004. You said, right? It was the year that it opened. And the first time that I walked into that store, and this maybe sounds hyperbolic, but I just mean it genuinely, I had a completely different feeling about that shopping center. It felt much more like a welcoming place with an individual identity all of its own. And I actually felt differently about the neighborhood. It felt like, sometimes like someone you haven't talked to in a long time, you don't realize you miss them, and then they call you and you talk to them and you say, oh yeah, I really missed talking to her. It felt like, oh, there was something that had been missing in the neighborhood. And when the bookstore opened, it felt like it was, that's what it was. It was like a focal point. It was a center to the neighborhood. It was a kind of beating heart. There's like Panera is great, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't have the same kind of feeling of intimacy and connection. And I'm someone who spends a lot of time in libraries, public libraries, because I like to write there. So I've been particularly bereft over the past couple months. Um, and I think that libraries are just so much more. Everybody knows this, but I was reminded of this reading Susan Orlean's book, the library book, that libraries are just so much more than these storehouses for books. They really are places that kind of, again, to be a little bit hyperbolic, keep the flame of various aspects of civilization, alive. And I think that a good independent bookstore does the same thing for community. It creates a sense of community. I think Porter Square is uniquely good at doing this, partially because I'm speculating it was founded by a group of people who had worked at Concord Books, as was stated. And it's not just that they love books, it's that they really love being booksellers. And that I love all independent bookstores. Whenever I go to a town I've never been in before, like the first thing I look for is the bookstore. And the second thing is like the health food store, and I'm not necessarily going to buy books or buy health food, but it just makes me feel like, okay, I understand the place a little bit better. And sometimes you go into an independent bookstore and you're happy that it's there, but you kind of feel like the owners thought, well, like books or shoe store, and Porter Square Books doesn't feel that way. It feels like it really is people who are true booksellers. They understand that books change people's lives, change people's minds, change people's hearts, entertain us, and connect us to what it really is to feel human and alive, and what is important to us. And I think over the past couple months, people have been feeling that more and more. And now with this, with what's going on politically, we all just want to feel that connection that you feel when you read books. I asked a few people that I know, local writers and people who live in the neighborhood, what they loved about Porter Square Books, so that it wouldn't just be my opinion. And what some of the people told me is that someone said, and I think this is absolutely true, is that it's kind of the perfect size bookstore. It is small enough that it feels kind of intimate. You don't feel like you're in some superstore with 5 stories and that they're selling refrigerators on this floor and books down here. But at the same time, it's big enough that you can, if you want to hang out there for like an hour and look at books, you don't feel conspicuous or like you're, being observed too closely. So I think it's just the ideal size, as this person said. The staff is incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly welcoming, but they're also very intuitive. And there was something in the Porter Square Books newsletter recently, and they very generously mentioned me as someone who they, is in there every day when I should be at home writing. But, and this is pre-pandemic, obviously, but, it is the kind of place where you feel like the staff kind of says hello and they're very friendly, but then they leave you alone if you are giving off that vibe. The reading series is just absolutely wonderful. And, you have everything in this reading series, from celebrity writers like David Sedaris to international favorites like Jane Gardam, the wonderful Australian, I think, writer that I heard read there, who was so wonderful. And then you have local poets and children's book writers, and no matter what it is, including kind of, writers who aspire to be mid-list writers like me, you make everybody feel like this is an important event and that the work that they're doing is important. And then, of course, it also has this wonderful cafe that neither dominates the space, as some do in some bookstores. It really doesn't there, but it's a wonderful, welcoming place. So those are some of the reasons that I chose
Yeah, I
Polish
can't
Queer
tell you how
books.
much that I mean, that makes me really, really want to go out and visit the bookstore. That's such a beautiful statement about what independent bookstores mean, and what they do for a community. Stephen, let me ask you, do you have a particular memory of Porter Square Books? I know that I'd asked you offline if you remember the first book you bought there, and you said absolutely not. But I mean, do you have a memory of an event there or an experience there, a reading there, sort of something that stands out in your mind as kind of
Well,
capturing the character of the bookstore?
I mean, one thing that uh, this doesn't exactly answer your question, but one thing that a lot of local writers, and I would state this as well, really appreciate is that Porter Square Books keeps my books and other local writers' books on their shelves. And, past the point at which maybe another bookstore would ship them back to the publisher. And that is like really, really meaningful. And, for a local writer to go into your local bookstore and see your book on the shelf it's just very inspiring. It makes you feel like, you know, your work that you're doing is not quite that pointless. It's really meaningful. I've been to so many wonderful readings there by friends who are also neighbors, Mamie Medwed, Sebastian Stewart, Margot Livesey, Christopher Castellani, and they feel like kind of like you're in someone's living room, with 150 people, but nonetheless in someone's living room, and that everyone is being welcome. And uh, so,
That's great. I want to make sure we get to the online audience. We are getting a bunch of questions from the online audience. A lot of love for your book, Stephen. Wendy says that My Ex-Life is one of my all-time favorite novels.
oh,
Just
you're one of my all-time favorite people, Wendy, whoever you are now.
um, and so some additional questions for you, Stephen. But first, it's been pointed out to me that I've been a terrible host, and I've been really remiss because, Lila, I did not ask you what it was like for Porter Square Books to be selected as Publishers Weekly Bookstore of the Year. That should have been the lead out of my intro. And
Ah,
I apologize, I'm off my game today. But tell us about it and tell us what that was like.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an amazing honor, first of all, because we know that all of the stores that were nominated are really, really amazing stores. So we were kind of like, oh my gosh, this is our competition right now. But I mean, it was incredibly gratifying to sort of have that recognition, and we had to sort of put together a little bit of an application, and we did that. We actually made I think it's like a 12-minute long video, and we got all of our owners and a lot of our staff members to participate, and we really put a lot of our heart into it, and just really wanted to show that we are all at Porter Square Books because that's what we want to do, not just because it's a job. We've all sort of made that really deliberate decision. And when we learned that we had won the bookstore of the year, it was so strange because it was really quite early on in this closure, and it was a weird feeling to both be really excited about it and really proud, but also like in a lot of uncertainty, and everybody else is having bad news. Some other stores that we really care about are, we're facing tough times and maybe doing GoFundMe. So it was a little bit of an odd time to get this really great news. But on the other hand, it was a moment where we really were like, this is our chance to sort of regroup, and it really gave us a lot of energy to figure out ways to sort of continue to serve our community even while we're closed, and really keep that engagement open, and sort of do justice to the reasons that we had gotten chosen in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And I think everybody in the Boston community was thrilled but not surprised. So that was amazing. Stephen, audience question for you, to turn to you on a sort of a little bit of a different note. 3 of your 7 novels have been turned into movies, including Object of My Affection with Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd. What is it like to have your book turned into a movie? What is that process like for the author?
Um, well, mostly it's like, you don't know. I mean, because, mostly they sort of say, oh, we really want your input. And then they never ask for it, and they never show you the script unless you ask them to see it, and so on. I mean, that's been my experience. Two of those movies were made in France, and that's a little bit different. I think that there's maybe more of a tradition of, French filmmakers really wanting the author's input.
Mm.
And the first time that I had a movie made there, the director came over here and he showed me the script and we went over it together. And he said, I really want you to be happy with this and feel that your book is represented, the way it should be represented. And I was like, really? Like, I mean, I thought it was like a joke or something, like I just couldn't believe it. But it's great. I mean, I guess because they've all been very different from the books, I've always viewed it as an advertisement for the books and haven't taken it too seriously beyond that. It just doesn't feel like my book anymore.
Hmm.
So not in a bad way, but just,
Yeah, it's a different creature.
yeah.
That's interesting. Lila, back to you with an audience question. Um, as you said, Porter Square Books is employee owned or partially employee owned. The audience question about how that works. How do decisions get made in an employee owned bookstore?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we have two majority owners still. Dina and David still own the majority. So if it really came down to it, they're kind of the tiebreakers, but we really very seriously take, making decisions as a group. We have management retreats and sort of separate management meetings, and really sort of stay in contact. I think it helps also that, we, you know, I don't think that it's too far off from the trust that Dina and David had in the staff beforehand. I think they always were really very much open to input, especially from the really wonderful veteran booksellers who opened the store to begin with. So it's really a huge asset because we have a lot of perspectives, and there might be sort of rush instincts of this is the right decision, but then you balance it, and sometimes those conversations are long, sometimes they're surprisingly short, but I think we all feel better for having had a conversation about it and coming to a conclusion that we all feel really good about.
That's great. Stephen, back over to you. Wendy does love It My Ex-Life and is wondering if you're planning to write a sequel.
Not at the moment, but never say never. I thought it would be fun. Actually, I thought of the perfect title for a sequel, which would be My Next Life. But I don't have the book, so
The title's the hardest part. Like you're halfway
I
there.
know, I'm halfway there, and I've got the characters already and everything. But no, I'm working on a very different. Well, not that different. All my books are basically the same, but a book with a different set of characters, and it's mostly about siblings.
Mm. You do famously travel when you write and go into public libraries when you write, and I mean you're known as a writer who hits the road and writes in public places. So how
Known.
um,
Famously.
in my mind, you're known.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
How has this been for you? How has this been that now that you can't go out, you can't travel, public libraries are closed? Have you been able to be productive?
I mean, yes, I write longhand, and I'm sitting here with this giant notebook that's like, full of scrawl. So I've been trying to write a little bit every day. I am not as productive as I would be if I were in a public space, because I think, I did an event last spring, I think, with 2019 with Andre Debus and Jr., and he said that he works in a soundproof room in the basement of his house with earphones on so that he can't hear anything. And, I'm exactly the opposite. I really like working in a place where there's a lot of noise and activity around me that I have to block out by going into the world that I'm trying to create on the page. So not having that, I mean, honestly, like, this is, talk about a problem of privilege, right? I mean, it's not anything compared with but just, it has been a little bit of a challenge for me to try
Yeah.
to figure out new ways to deal with that. So.
Right. We're winding down on time. Lila, I just wanted to come back to you for one final question, which is about events, because I think most of us who love independent bookstores love independent bookstore events. As I said before, I've been to many of Porter Square books, to debuts, to hear people like Andre Debus and Richard Russo and sort of authors like that when they come through town. Is there an event that stands out in your mind as having been especially exciting or exceptional or funny or noteworthy that has come through the store that you would want to tell us about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'm the events manager, so really they all are sort of like my babies, and I put a lot of work and a lot of thought into, really curating a great lineup that is, as Stephen was saying, a mix of, it's really important to us to support local writers, and then also to support, the writers that our customers love and are popular and exciting, and it's been quite an experience to sort of put that whole program together. There's a lot that I could call out. I would say, maybe kind of one of the most special ones to me was one that, I really felt like this was one that we put in so much work and so much heart. We read this debut novel, Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. I met the author at a book breakfast, and she has the exact same energy that her book does, which is joyous, and it's all about understanding yourself and embracing yourself and coming to terms, really it's a coming of age story. And right at the top of the book, there's this really great blurb, and it, I don't know if I'm allowed to quote it because it has a curse word in it, but it was from Roxane Gay. It said, "Fucking outstanding," right on the cover of the book. And we said, what can we do to make this event as outstanding as that blurb? And so, the book starts off with the main character, Juliet, writing a letter to her idol, asking if she can come study with her. So I wrote a letter to my idol, Roxane Gay, and asked if she would come. And I got an email back that was probably like 3 words. And it was like, I can do September 25th. And from there, we just made it happen.
Oh my God.
We invited a bunch of high schoolers from local high schools and gave them all free copies of the book that we paid for. And there were probably like about 500 just really excited, enthusiastic people. And they had the most amazing conversation. It was, people afterwards were saying how it was, the best event of their life. And it might be the best event of my life.
Where did you hold it?
We held it in Cambridge Ringe and Latin High School in their big auditorium.
Oh, great.
I think that pretty much sums up what Porter Square Books is and what it means to the community and to authors. That's fabulous. Lila, tell us, what can book lovers do to support Porter Square at this time? If people want to pick up some new books, if they want to support Porter Square Books, what can we do?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot. You can certainly come to our website, portersquarebooks.com, and place an order. As I mentioned, we have curbside pickup, so if you're local, you can pick it up. If you're not local, we ship everywhere. So, you can certainly place an order that way. We've gotten a lot of orders, so we appreciate your patience. That's another way you can support your local bookstore, is by extending them a little bit of courtesy in these sort of strange times, just a little bit of leeway for we'd love to turn them around as quickly as we can. And there's lots of other ways that you can support bookstores, even if there's not something that you want right now. Pre-orders are a really great way. If you have a little bit of extra cash and you want to support your bookstore, buy a book, and when you pre-order a book, you're really supporting an author as well as a bookstore. So that's a great method. And another sort of thing right now, there's everybody is looking for a certain subsect of books. I can tell you that we have over 100 orders for How to Be an Anti-Racist right now, which is so amazing. We love seeing our customers buying that book. And we can't get it for them right now because it's out of stock. But what never goes out of stock are audiobooks. And you can go to Libro FM and you can choose an independent bookstore. I would recommend Porter Square Books, but there's lots of other great ones. And your audiobook will get downloaded right away. You can dig in without waiting, and you're supporting an independent bookstore at the same time. And finally, I hope that you guys will come and check out our virtual events grid. We have a bunch of really cool stuff coming up on Saturday. We have actually one of our co-owners, Marika, is the author of a New York Times bestselling graphic novel called Baba Yaga's Assistant. And she's going to be doing sort of a little bit of a comics drawing workshop. So you can come and tune in and bring a pen and paper. It's good for kids, good for adults, and you can kind of join along with our events. And it's just one of many. So I hope that people will just check out portersquarebooks.com and kind of follow along with us. And, we just really can't wait to be back to normal times where we can invite people to our store.
That's right. That's great. Thank you. That is the time we have today. I want to thank author Stephen McCauley. I want to thank bookseller Lila Meglio from Porter Square Books. Book lovers, please go to Porter Square online at www.portersquarebooks.com. Pick up some of Stephen's novels, including his most recent, My Ex-Life. To learn more about his work, visit stephenmccauley.com. If he does do a sequel, he will probably let us know about it there. And please join us here next Wednesday for more of a Mighty Blaze's Authors Love Bookstores. And until then, stay safe and keep reading.